Hello, here we are into, well, it's not really the second week, but it sort of is the second week. If you'd like to get out your weekly syllabus, all right, and also the directions for paper number one, which will be due on Monday, that might be helpful for you. So you might want to pause this to get those open or out or whatever. Because I'm going to talk about the textbook material and then I'm going to talk about what's due this coming week in this Watch Me. Anyway, I am enjoying your posts in the forums. It's nice to meet you all. Y'all have some interesting ideas about persuasion, and the reason I flip-flopped the forums was because I kind of wanted you to feel your way out there without really knowing what you were doing yet, and why I picked such a controversial topic for that first post. All of y'all handled that very well, and I appreciate that. Did you disagree with some of the posts that people put up? Oh, yeah, I am positive you did. But you all handled yourselves very well with that. So that's the first step in persuasion. And that's why I put it first and then introduce yourself second. Anyway, so we're still missing a few of you all on some of those. You don't want to get behind. And don't forget, I'm taking those two down real early Monday morning, probably before you all are out of bed, and you may not go back and do those afterwards. So if you haven't done them, you're up the creek. You lose the 10 points for those. And there are a few of you all that have done neither one of those. Now, this is Saturday afternoon. You may get those done, obviously, before I take them down on Monday morning. Let's talk about what the material is that we'll cover this week for a few minutes, and so you have some idea about that. Unit 2, Chapter 2 in the textbook is about advocacy. How do you actually advocate for something that you want, or you want people to believe in, or you want somebody to do? And so it builds a good case about how you actually become an advocate for something. And that's what we're talking about. That's what your first papers are about that we'll talk about in a few minutes here. So we talk about things like freedom of speech and freedom of expression and how important it is for people to express their opinions. We'll go back into some of the ancient Greek, Plato, Aristotle, all those good folks about the process of understanding where this whole approach to persuasion comes from, back to our ancient roots, and how people actually go about trying to persuade others by advocacy, by advocating for something. And how, this is a textbook that deals sort of with that self-persuasion, chapter, sort of with persuasion, because it talks about your individual freedom, all right? Meaning your individual ability to make a choice, or whether or not you're coerced, force of factions, so that you have to do things. And so it talks some about open and closed societies. We talk about, probably the perfect example right now that all of us are paying attention to is, we are an open society. North Korea is what we would refer to as a closed society. So you'll see some discussion about that, and in the PowerPoints and in the textbook about how do we do that and how do we actually exchange ideas. Now, technology comes into play here in this also, because we use technology so much today with our freedom of expression. Right, so that's a part of this chapter also. I think you all will enjoy this chapter. It's really more a basis of here's how we get to how do you persuade others. So it's more a historical type of chapter than actually hands-on. How do you do it? And so we talk about things like free speech and what we actually are doing. And a couple of y'all are in the comm theory class also, so some of this is going to cross over when you get to the chapters on public rhetoric, because the whole idea of Plato and Socrates and Aristotle and those folks was that persuasion was what rhetoric was. And so when we talk about coming up with a rhetorical argument, we talk about being persuasive. So I think the chapter is simple, and you will get and understand a lot of those the things that are there. It's more the history chapter of how we get to persuasion. And then Unit 3 takes it a little bit further. It takes being an advocate and how do you do it. All right. And what this chapter deals with is what it says, the management of symbols. So we're talking language. We're also talking about visual things. A lot of you all are advertising majors. So you're talking about pictures. You're talking about nonverbal aspects, nonverbal symbols. And so there are many different things that come into play when you're being an advocate. Now, language, all right, and this is one that talks about chapter that talks about signs and symbols, and that will be repeat, for those of you who are communication majors, you hear it in just about every comm class you take. Signs and symbols, what we use, what words we choose, what symbolism we use, the meanings of words, which we get into trouble because what I use a word for, it might not have the same meaning for you. Context comes into play in this chapter. This chapter also looks at how does language function in our society and how does it function in persuasive messages. So that becomes a very important aspect there. This one deals some with politics and the political use of language, and we've been seeing a lot of that, especially in the past year or two. With our presidential campaign of last fall and the new president and rhetoric, one of the things that has changed completely is this use of Twitter to get a political message out there. So, there'll be some things that are different because this textbook was written long before that. I mean, it's 2014. It's not terribly long ago. But that political use of language comes into play there. And then how do you use your political language strategically? So we'll talk about how do you build an argument, getting the audience to identify with you, identification, narration, all right? And narrative is very important in public persuasion. The inoculation theory, this is where I mentioned in the earlier Watch Me about this is not a one-shot deal. You can't just inoculate one time and then the persuasion takes place. So how people tend to generalize and stereotype. Those are all part of this because this is the chapter that deals with your use of language and what language you use to persuade people. How do you get people to see things as polar opposites? Polarization, textbook talks about. Defining terms, how do you express yourself? How do you show power when you need to show power? And what kind of power? I was having a discussion with one of the students in your class the other day about, what kind of power do you want and how do you do that? Do you want coercive power, which is force, or do you want what we call referent power or role model power? You have power over somebody because they look up to you, right? So that's part of that process as well. And so then that chapter ends with things about political use of specific language devices, and you'll see some examples in the PowerPoint, labeling, doublespeak, which is interesting to look at, especially because we see a lot of it. We keep hearing this fake news line. What does that mean? That's doublespeak. All right, there's some doublespeak aspects to that, and one group of people defines fake news differently than the other ones do, or the one that came out originally where people were talking about being deceptive was alternative facts. What does that mean? All right, that was a language choice that somebody used. So and also things like hate speech and ridicule of others comes into play here. So this is the chapter that deals a lot with public and political discourse via language. So you're going to need to start paying attention to your language. And in fact, I have a couple of things that I wrote down about some of the things that I'm noticing in your posts about language usage and grammar and those kinds of things. So, okay, if you'll notice on the weekly syllabus there, where you have chapter 2 and chapter 3 this week, and right there tells you, advocacy in society and advocacy and the use of symbols. You'll note that test 1 goes up this week. It will be posted Thursday by midday. It will be due Sunday by 5. The reason I do it for that long post, it's not a test you can cheat on. I ask you to come up with examples of your own, okay? You need to understand the concept clearly that I'm asking about to come up with an example for that. So you need to make sure you've done the reading by then. There's only 3 chapters, all right? You should be able to do that between now and Wednesday. Hopefully you already did chapter 1 this past week. All right, and then I give you the 4 topics of the forum questions for this week, so you know those are coming. Keep in mind, forum questions will go up in the morning and come down the following morning. I usually get here a little bit before 7, so by 7 there'll be a new question up and the old one will be gone. All right, the one exception I will make is on Thursday questions, because you're going to be doing tests also. I will leave that one up just like I've left up the ones for this week up until I put up the Monday ones. I just made the decision that I would go ahead and do that because you've got a few things that are due there. So, but every other one, it goes down. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, forum questions will go down the next morning. Thursdays, I'll leave up until I put up the one the following Monday. Remember, there are 4 a week. Okay. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is you have a paper that will be due. The test will be clear, by the way. It'll ask you a question. It'll ask you to come up with an example of how you have seen this, or give me something that shows that you know this. So it will make sense when you get the first one, but nobody should have any real problems with that. Now, the first paper is due Monday. Let me just talk about that for a minute. My handout I'm using my computer, so I'm pulling up the screen here on my iPad. But here's paper number 1. It gives you a description. Choose a topic you feel strongly about. Choose something you feel strongly about. Take a position of advocacy. That's what these 2 chapters are about, advocating for something. All right, and the paper's due Monday, so you'll have done the test. You'll have read the chapters, hopefully. All right, and you are going to advocate for something. All right, how do you advocate? What tools of advocacy are you going to use? What would a campaign that you put together look like for this? All right, so you have to include your position, your public belief, all right, on your position. In other words, how would you express it publicly? What would you tell people? All right, and you have to have at least 3 sources. Now that's a biggie. You'll see me make some comments to people on the forum posts about evidence is important. Some of you got that when I was grading the forum questions. Evidence is extremely important to advocacy. So, and I ask you for that. You need at least 2 sources that come from persons who do not advocate for what you believe, because that way you become persuasive by knocking down their argument, by taking your position. All right, the description there is clear. Include the issues that I ask you to mention up there above, and your position of advocacy, and including your language choices, any technology you might use, and if it's a political issue, which of those specific tools of language do you see yourself using? Those ones that are at the end of chapter 3. You do need a bibliography. I will tell you that every summer when I teach this, there are some folks that are missing the bibliography. Don't miss the bibliography. All right, you're going to save it as a PDF and upload it into As You Learn. I already have that open and available for you to do that whenever you're ready. So, and this is a writing in discipline course. So yes, I am grading grammar. There is a handout for bibliography. There's a handout for writing skills. All right. And also, please watch your grammar in your forum posts. I'm seeing some things that I'm like, whoa. All right. Watch your grammar, proofread, and also in your papers. Y'all, I'm enjoying the forums. I will see you again at the beginning of next week. Bye.